Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about navigating the difficult relationship. From simple disagreements to emotionally abusive behaviors, you deserve respect and kindness. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Every now and then I'll get a message from someone who decides to leave an abusive relationship. And they share with me what they had to think about, what they had to go through, how long it took. And it's almost always the same story. The story typically contains the moment of realization, which is what I call a threshold moment, where the person writing to me, the person going through this, says to themselves, I've had enough. I'm done. This is it. It's over. And sometimes they will tell, let's just say it's a romantic relationship, they will tell their partner that you either have to change or I'm gone. And if their partner says, wait, I'll change, hopefully they will. But some partners, some people do not want to change and believe that everyone else in the world should change for them. And those are the kind of people that sometimes we just have to admit that we cannot stay with, we cannot be with, because they refuse to look inside themselves. They refuse to reflect on what they're doing. And they refuse to accept that they are a problem and probably the problem in the relationship. And so when you're with somebody who refuses to look inward, who refuses to reflect, no matter what you try, if they refuse to look inward and at least say something along the lines of, okay, I will work on that in myself. I will think about it. I will read about it. I will go to therapy about it. If they refuse to look inward at all, even when the end of the relationship is imminent, because that's when most emotionally abusive people will look inward. They will realize that, oh crap, my partner is serious and I really do need to change, so I better get cracking. I better start the process. I better work on this. I better read. I better watch videos. I better go to therapy, whatever it takes. Over and over again, that like 90-something% of the people that come into my program that actually choose to change do so because of the fear of the loss of the relationship. And as much as the people listen to this show, as much as you might want them to realize it sooner, and you hope that at least they can look at you suffering or crying or whatever and figure it out, as much as you want that to happen so that they develop empathy and say, oh my God, I can't believe I'm hurting you. I'm so sorry. I'll change. Most won't do it until the threat of the loss of the relationship is real. And until it's real, they don't think it's a problem. Or a lot of them don't think it's a problem. And so you're kind of stuck in this day-to-day cycle of hurtful, controlling, and manipulative behavior that doesn't end until they finally realize that you're serious. And they don't realize you're serious, again, 90+% of them don't realize you're serious until you reach your threshold and you say, I've had enough. And that is not happy news, because you would think that somebody who says they love you and says they care about you would see that you're in pain or suffering or falling into a depression or losing your passion for life or feel like a shell of your former self. You would think that they'd see that and realize, wow, I don't want that to happen. What can I do to make you happy? What should I do differently? What can I do to make this better for my partner? On and on and on. But it doesn't hit most of them until the end of the relationship is imminent. When the end of the relationship is imminent, that's when they finally, what I like to call, snap out of their trance, because they've been in this trance the whole time, being hurtful or controlling or manipulative or all of the above to someone they claim to love, they claim to care about, yet they are still doing these behaviors even though they see the other person suffering. And so my whole point is, if they refuse to look inward, even when the relationship is ending, like there's an imminent threat of the relationship ending and they realize it could be true, and they still refuse to look inward, not only should you expect the very same behavior you've been seeing, but you should probably see more of it, which I know can sound ominous. It can sound like that's not what you want to experience, and it actually might prevent some people from trying to leave a relationship like that. But it is important to understand what you're dealing with. So I don't mean to paint a scary picture. If you are thinking about leaving a relationship like this, there are two outcomes. One, it will get worse before it gets better. And that better is when you finally break free of that abuse cycle. And option two is it doesn't get worse. It actually does get, quote, better, but that's because they finally realize that they are the ones that are causing the problems, and they're admitting it, they're accepting it, and they are willing to get help and willing to change. And that it's a huge step they have to take. They have to take a massive step into someone they aren't. They have to take a massive step into a person they've never been. And what I mean by that is when somebody's been a certain way all their life and they believe this is how you're supposed to treat other people, it's like telling someone, okay, now I want you to be an astronaut. If they were never an astronaut and they never studied astrophysics, if they were never that person and they never did healthy behaviors, all they know is what they know. All they know is what they've learned as a child, in building those survival mechanisms that turned into horrible coping mechanisms when they were older in adult relationships, on and on and on. It's a whole process of how triggers are formed. And I work with people on those triggers in my Healed Being program, because those triggers are their coping skills, if you want to call them skills. They are the mechanisms that they use to deal with challenges. So whenever they get triggered, they are relying on old survival mechanisms from childhood. Most of the time, this is how it works. They rely on those old mechanisms from childhood, and then they apply them to adult situations. So if they were avoidant in childhood because they didn't want to get yelled at, they might be withdrawing love and connection in their adult relationships so that they don't get in trouble, or they don't have to deal with their insecurity around it. They don't have to be honest about something. So what is important for the emotionally abusive person to do is work on those emotional triggers, which means working on their lifetime coping mechanisms. And that is somebody they've never been. It would be like me telling you, hey, you know, when you hear a car horn and you hear screeching tires, that you normally take a step back. You know, you're stepping off the sidewalk, you hear the beep and the screeching tires, you're most likely going to take a step back. That survival skill is helpful. But if I said, no, you need to take a step forward toward the screeching tires, you would call me crazy. You would say that's not what I'm not going to do that, and that's not the way to survive. So I'm not going to do that. That's just bad advice, Paul. And I would agree with you. But what happens in the mind of somebody who has been perpetrating these behaviors all their life is that they believe the way they have coped, by hurting others, by controlling others, by not dealing with their insecurities because maybe they don't believe they have them, what they've done in place of dealing with challenges in a healthy way is the opposite of what they should be doing. So a lot of emotionally abusive people do the opposite of what they should do because that's how they learned to survive as a child. So that's a deeper subject that I get into in the program, but I bring that up because that is what emotionally abusive people who will reflect have to deal with. And that is a massive step into a direction that they're not used to going, which is why it takes somebody in their life to shake their foundation and shake them from the trance, to let them know that this behavior is unacceptable and I won't be in your life anymore if you continue doing it. So this is the threshold I'm talking about. I was starting to make a point. I forget what it was, but I started to say that if you are in a relationship with somebody who refuses to reflect, even after you've brought up all the behaviors they're doing and all the hurtful things they're saying and whatever else that is causing you to feel bad all the time, and they refuse to look inward, then the threat of leaving the relationship might shake them out of that trance, or it might make them worse. And this is my sort of original point, where you're going to see either them getting worse if you do plan on leaving, or them stopping the behaviors altogether because they are shaken from that trance. And then at that point, you have to start building evidence that they are changing. And that's a whole nother process in itself that I talk about on other episodes. But the whole idea is, if they choose to reflect and choose to change, then all these variables have to line up if the relationship is to heal. Now, sometimes, quite often, the recipient of that behavior is done and they have locked or sealed their heart shut, and they don't want to share their heart again with the person who's been hurtful all this time. So these variables exist. The person could get worse. They could get better. They could heal and change. You might still have love in your heart. You might not. If you reach your threshold, your end of the line, when the straw broke the camel's back, if you reach that point, you may definitely have sealed your heart shut. And when it's sealed, it usually doesn't open up again. In my experience, I've been doing this a long time. In my experience, the victims of emotionally abusive behavior, when they've reached their threshold and their heart is sealed, they rarely, very rarely, open it back up again. Because what happens inside them is the threshold empowers them to protect themselves, because they didn't want any further damage. They realize that if this continues, if I don't protect myself, then I will be ultimately destroyed. And some people get to that point and continue to stay in the relationship for various reasons. And that's when they become numb, apathetic, depressed. They lose their zest, their passion for life. And there are others that say, I'm not going to allow that, and I can't let this go any further. And they may have felt that way for a long time. They may have felt passionless and feeling depressed. They may have felt that way for a long time, but didn't want it to get worse. They felt like it was time. And there's a point where you'll know it's time. It's time. I have to say something. I have to do something. I have to move on without this in my life. When you get to that point, that is usually your point of threshold. It is very similar, and I've talked about this before, it is very similar to, let's just say that you're the nicest person in the world, and maybe you're a people pleaser, maybe not, but you're just a nice person, you're caring, you're generous, you're supportive, and somebody, they punch you in the shoulder, and you don't like it, and they didn't punch it hard, and you think, ha, that's funny. Don't do that. That doesn't feel very good. And then they do it again. And then you're kind of ticked off and you think, yeah, that's not very nice. Please don't do that again. And then they do it again. And you say, please don't do that again. And you're trying to be nice because maybe they are messing around. Maybe they are just joking. But it's kind of mean. And they do it again. And it doesn't hurt, but it doesn't not hurt. And maybe you're starting to bruise there, and so it's starting to hurt. And you're getting more and more agitated, and they do it again, and then they do it again. There is a point in every single person listening. There's a point in you where you will reach your threshold. You will draw the line. You will stop that behavior, no matter what it takes. You will do it. And the reason I'm telling you this is because there are people listening that may not believe they have it in them to stop somebody from doing behaviors to them. I'm not talking about violent abuse. I'm not talking about where you are in a very scary, physically violent, dangerous situation where your life is on the line. I'm talking about in many emotionally abusive and psychologically and verbally abusive relationships, you aren't dealing with somebody who might necessarily hurt you physically. They might. I'm not saying they won't. But in most of the relationships that I've dealt with that have emotional abuse, there is one person that is highly insecure and doing abusive behaviors to keep that control so that they feel like they're in control of their life, and if they can control you, they feel more secure. So that's how they compensate for that insecurity. Doesn't usually lead to violent behavior, but there are those who do that. So my disclaimer is you never know, so you have to be careful. But in many or most cases that I've worked with people, heard from people, there's been no physical violence. So in a non-physical violent relationship where you have had enough, you've had enough of the belittling or the controlling or the withdrawing of love and connection as a means to guilt you, you've had enough of that, you will reach a threshold, just like if somebody was punching your arm in a joking way and they wouldn't stop, and they wouldn't stop, and they did it again and they wouldn't stop. You're gonna reach that critical mass. You are done. And at that point, you will stop them. And so I know I used a physical example here, but that is my point, is that you do have a threshold even when you think you don't. You do have a stopping point where you draw the line and you say no more. Even if it's inside you, you might say, no more. I'm done. No more of this behavior. I won't tolerate it anymore. I'm going to do something. I'm going to change something. I'm going to tell them they need to stop, or else I'm going to leave. Whatever the choice is for you. But when you get there, here's kind of a magical thing, and it's not a pleasant thing, but it's kind of a magical thing, is that you know exactly what to say, because when you're in that state, when you're in that threshold, or when you're at that threshold point, you will say exactly what needs to be said. It will be crystal clear to you what you need to say and do, or just do. You will know specifically what you need to say or do, because at that moment when you've had enough, suddenly you become clear. The fog lifts immediately. You know that fog you're always in? It lifts immediately. The fog is the confusion. What should I do? I don't know how to deal with this. What do I say? What's my next step? All of those questions and confusion goes away, and you become crystal clear. It's just like if you saw, I'm going to guess, if you saw a child in serious trouble, you would rescue that child. If you see a child, I don't want to speak of any specific dangers, but let's just say you saw a child in danger, imminent, immediate danger. What are you going to do? You're going to do everything you can to save that child. I think most people would do that. And it's not a matter of, oh, I better not do that. It's a matter of, that child is in trouble. I'm going to save that child. And you just jump into action. And if you have children of your own, you know exactly what I mean. And if you don't, you probably still know exactly what I mean, because I don't have children, and I know if I saw a child about to get, whatever, I'm going to take action, no matter what it took. It wasn't a thought process. It just happened. So this is what happens when you reach that threshold. And I'm talking about all this because it's very much in reference to a message that I'm going to read to you right now. This person wrote and said, "Dear Paul, thank you for your show. It helped me navigate my feelings and thoughts during my difficult relationship. I finally made the decision and left my partner of 30 years just a few weeks ago. It took 3 years of processing, counseling, giving up alcohol before I took the step. We weren't married, and I had what some might call a very comfortable life, but I realized he treated me as a subordinate. He'd rage at me in the past for things like not picking up the phone, to the point that I was scared and had to leave the house. He calls his screaming, that's just a bit of shouting. I did everything in the house, and I wouldn't have minded that, but he told me repeatedly, why should I thank you? If I asked him if he liked his meal, he'd say, you're so needy. I wasn't allowed to have an opinion on anything if it differed from his, or I was deemed ignorant, or living in a bubble, or just difficult. When I told him I wanted a separation, he accused me of stealing from him for years. I never did that, but he still holds this belief. He tells everyone he can't understand why I left. I know he used me as an emotional punching bag so that he could channel his anger and maintain his good guy image. I find it so hard that he still doesn't reflect, even when I have told him, you scare me, and I'm always to blame. He can't or won't see it. I admit I'm scared and excited for this next chapter in my life. I'm trying to be grounded and strong for my child, who is wonderful. Anyway, thank you for being a light in my darkness. I scored 168 on the mean assessment. Thank you for sharing that. And just to clarify, if you don't know what the mean assessment is, it's a 200-point assessment in the mean workbook that I offer on my website at loveandabuse.com. If you get anywhere over 140, you're in a severe situation. This person got a 168, and of course anything around that or above that is even worse. So I know there's a lot that she was dealing with. And to the person who wrote, I'm so sorry you went through this, and I'm so glad to hear that you have taken steps to empower yourself and go in the direction that works for you. And just to kind of relate to what we were talking about today, you found out that when you reached your threshold, your partner got worse. Your partner exaggerated and made things up just to keep his control over you. I mean, this is a lesson for everyone. Someone who is controlling and demoralizing like this, somebody who belittles you and is ungrateful and yells at you and rages at you and makes you feel like you're not only not an equal, but you're under them in every way. They are most likely going to make stuff up to keep you in their control, and they are the least likely to change, because there's not even a hint of love and respect in the relationship. Now, I'm saying this knowing that there are people listening right now that have this kind of relationship that feel probably a little defeated, like they can't change. That's not possible. It is possible. It definitely is possible. If somebody is listening right now that is in this kind of relationship, or the perpetrator of this kind of behavior is listening right now, I have had people join my program that have been this pretty much awful, and they did change. So it is possible. It's just that the percentage of people that are like this while in the relationship, demoralizing, disrespectful, downright nasty and mean, when they are like that, they are less likely to change, because there's something in them that is not even trying to see you happy, not even trying to see a little smile or make you feel loved and important. If that's not there at all, that's usually when you've reached your threshold and you say something along the lines of, look, I've had enough, that's it, I'm leaving. That's usually the type of person that will make things harder. And again, I don't say that to prevent you from making decisions that are right for you, because if that's your plan, you may have to deal with some hard stuff if you choose to get out of a relationship like that. But at the same time, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you have to look at it in two ways. Am I staying with this person with no light at the end of the tunnel, or am I going to leave this person with no light at the end of the tunnel for now, but eventually I will get out of it? So there's this hard place. It's if you plan on leaving a relationship like this, it's a hard place, because either way it might be difficult, but there's usually a guarantee that one path will lead to a much lighter, happier place. Whereas if you stay with somebody like that who refuses to change, it never changes. It just stays that way. And so I'm not the bearer of good news all the time, but this is what I see. And so again, if you are in a relationship with somebody who belittles you, disrespects you, is very mean, and thinks that you are just lower than them and is not treating you as an equal, and the love is never there, there's no emotional connection whatsoever, there are no apologies, there are no taking responsibility. If none of that is there, then that's when I usually see somebody who has a harder time changing into the person they need to be. And I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about them. They have a harder time changing because most of them are just so self-righteous. They refuse to believe that they could do anything wrong. And they refuse to accept that they have all these insecurities inside of them that they won't visit that or those parts of themselves. And because they won't visit those parts of themselves, they'll never find out what they need to heal. And so you may have that in your life if you're dealing with that, or if they're not changing and you reach your threshold and you finally decide to leave or tell them you're going to leave, they may get shaken from their foundation and realize, oh crap, all my life I've been this way, I need to change. That would be nice. That would be great. But if you choose to be in that relationship and you want to see it heal, you're going to have to see over and over and over again what used to trigger them no longer does. That's usually the test, like what used to trigger them. And it's interesting because I had another message that I'll probably read on another episode where somebody said them and their partner used to listen to this show together, and their partner did start changing. And they broke up for a while, and their partner came back, and they started doing all the things that I said, to look for in a healing partner. And so what they were technically doing is, or they were manipulating the person that they were controlling and hurtful to. They came back acting like they were healed. And this is why it's so important to fully test those triggers. If you don't fully test the triggers, you might get duped by somebody who seems to be changing and seems to be healing. But some people don't want to bring up the triggers because everything's going so great. Why would I want to bring that up and ruin everything? But that's the wrong direction. And I'm not saying that that person who wrote to me didn't try that or didn't do that. I'm just saying what you need to do is if you have somebody who decides to heal and change in your life, you do need to kind of test those triggers. If they were a jealous person, you might have to test their jealousy. And I'm not saying how to do that. I'm just saying whatever upset them before will likely upset them again if they haven't worked on their healing and change. So that's something that you would do if you were interested in working on the relationship and hoping that they would come back to the person they used to, or at least the person they showed you at first, because that's what happens. They show us the best version of themselves at first, and then they start slowly changing into somebody that we don't like. And they don't even seem to like us. Like when they change, they don't seem to like us. They just want to get what they want, regardless of what we want. And when you're with somebody who doesn't seem to care what you want and only seems to care what they want, and when they get what they want, they don't seem to care how it affects you, that's a problem. Obviously, that's a problem. And so to the person who wrote, again, thank you for writing. And let me just say a few things. Some emotionally abusive people can be helped. They can get help. I've seen a lot of people heal and change in my program, and some can't. Some won't. When I say can't, it means won't. Some people won't get help because they have shown, at least at the beginning of the relationship, that they are capable of being kind and caring and compassionate and supportive. They've shown that they are capable, but then there's a point where they choose not to be. They choose not to be kind and caring and supportive and all that. And so it tells me that there are those who make a choice to be hurtful and controlling and manipulative and emotionally abusive. All those are in the same bucket. And then there are those who, whether they choose to do it or not, choose to be this way or not, who actually do want to change and heal. And it is possible. You don't know who you're dealing with until you get to that point where they finally choose to reflect and work on themselves, and not just tell you that they're working on themselves, but you see visible changes almost right away. That is a clear sign of them working on themselves. And so again, you're going to have those who want to heal and choose to heal, and then there are those who refuse to see that they are the problem, and they will stay angry. They will stay angry at you because now you are even less controllable. If you reach your threshold and you've had enough and you're not going to continue the relationship, you become less controllable. That is a good thing, but it's also a challenge for the person who wants to control you. That's why it might get harder. So let me just end with this. It's interesting to me that almost all bullying, everyone that bullies, who intimidates, who gets angry, who puts fear in you because they know you're afraid if they become this way or they are this way around you, it's interesting how they feel powerful when they are carrying such massive insecurities. And all those behaviors that make them feel in control and powerful are behaviors to compensate and make up for and cover everything they're insecure about. There are very angry people walking around who would rather put others down and make everyone else feel small so that they don't have to deal with what they need to heal in themselves. And that affects everyone. It affects the people they claim to care about. If it affects the people that care about them, it affects them in their own life, even without other people. So if they have no one as a target of their behaviors, they still carry around some low-level emotional triggers that can be set off by others. They may not show them with others. They typically only show them with the closest people in their life. And if you've never heard me give the reason that is, it is this. It's because when you are in a relationship where you become close with one another and you are sharing everything with one another, and sometimes or often there's physical intimacy where you're sharing literally everything with the other person, you get closer to someone's emotional core or their heart. You get closer to what they're carrying around, where the skin is the thinnest. And that thin skin around, or that thin wall around their emotional core, contains all of their vulnerabilities and insecurities. So the closer you are and the more things you've shared with the other person allows you to get to know each other so well that some people feel too vulnerable when they're in a romantic relationship because you've shared everything. And if you feel so vulnerable that you're afraid that someone might see the real you, you might end up doing behaviors that control them from seeing the real you. And that's not the only reason, but the anger, the intimidation, the bullying behavior, and that's mainly what I'm talking about right now. Those aggressive or volatile behaviors that are a person trying to keep control in their life so they don't feel like they're out of control, they will do these behaviors to mainly control other people so that they don't expose their vulnerabilities to the closest person to them, because then they will feel completely exposed, completely naked, which is where love is too. If you are able to don your emotional armor, take it all off with another person, that means you feel safe and you are allowing yourself to feel vulnerable and you feel 100% comfortable and trusting around that person. And the emotionally abusive person doesn't feel that way. They have a lot protecting that vulnerability, those insecurities inside of them, so that you don't see that about them. And I'm not saying this is why you should have compassion and all that. I mean, of course, you are probably a compassionate person anyway, which is how you got here. That's a good feature to have. It's a good quality to have. But sometimes that keeps us from seeing the other side of what's going on because we're so focused on the good qualities. And if you don't see those or don't pay attention to those other qualities, and you're only focused on the good stuff, and you don't address the bad stuff, you don't address the hurtful stuff, or you don't choose not to accept it, not to tolerate and get away from it, then it prolongs it and you end up in, like, for example, this person in a 3-decade-long relationship where the abuse cycle never, ever ended. And I'm just going to leave this on a good note by thanking this person who wrote. I am so happy that you are going into a better place, a better space. You are probably dealing with a lot of processing. I know. I mean, you just left this relationship and you have been with the same person for 30 years. And now you need to learn what it's like to be on your own without this person, or be somewhere else where that person is no longer in your life. And as exciting as that may sound and feel, it's also scary as hell, because when you don't know any other life without a person you've just spent most of your life with, or a good part of your life with. It can feel like you're going into another chapter of your life without even knowing who you are. Who am I? I got to take this first step into this big new world, and I don't even know who I am because my identity was wrapped up in this relationship. And that's how I see relationships, is like you and me and us. And when you are gone, that means us is gone. So I kind of have like 2/3 of my identity to fill up now. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to look forward to, because you get to forge the path and build the life that you want and works for you and feels good to you. That is a very good thing. It allows you to discover yourself or rediscover yourself. And even though you had this difficult relationship, the way you rebuild yourself is going to contain a lot of self-love. And I love that for you. I am so happy for you. And I know it's a challenge, but you're going to make it. You're going to do fine. You're going to be great. And for you and anyone listening or anyone that needs to hear this, stay strong. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook contains a 200-point assessment to tell you exactly what's causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. Gain clarity on your relationship today. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. You can also listen to the podcast over there, and there's even a safe listening button where all the titles to the episodes are changed so that you don't have to explain to anyone what you're listening to and why. Now, if you've discovered that you are doing hurtful behaviors to someone that you care about and you want to change that about yourself, I can help you. Sign up for the only program that walks you through the entire process of healing from being emotionally abusive. It has changed thousands of lives and relationships and can change yours too. Visit healedbeing.com to start with some free lessons right away. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You are worthy of respect, kindness, and love, and you deserve to be accepted exactly as you are. We'll talk again soon.